Now, connecting to that question is what Christian Fleischer did in modeling. And he will tell us about the use of spatial data to build energy system models. Christian is a PhD at the University of Flensburg, where he's doing energy system modeling and specifically looking at the integration of the whole thing, all of Europe, the sector coupling and everything. So what are the data and how do we use the data? Spatial data, the resolution that we need for the models that we actually see what's going on. So, Christian, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me clearly. Thank you for the introduction, Olaf, and for the former presenters, for your insights. I will be talking more about the use of spatial data when we build energy system models. First of all, what do we need to build a model? So I'm focused here, this diagram focuses on the power system optimization model, but a similar graph could be used for one that is sector coupled if you want to add heat. There are different components that you need to add in your model, and these components have a spatial and a temporal aspect, and they need to be represented in your optimization model if you want to have a representation that is capturing the variation of the renewables and also capture some storage and transmission networks that you want to depict in your model and understand them accurately. So you need to have some representation of your demand, and demand is also spatially distributed across Europe. You have your capacity factors, and capacity factors basically describe the amount of energy that you can produce in different areas. When are they available? In what seasons do you maybe have more of renewables available in a specific area? So how can you tap into those areas and minimize maybe the need for storage or transmission? And you also need to have understand what are your constraints. So Laura gave a good introduction of what are the spatial constraints in the North Sea, but spatial constraints are everywhere. They're also on land. We have cities. You have constraints within the cities where you can place your renewables, and PV is a renewable technology that is actually suited for cities, but as opposed to wind, that is we have restrictions, legal frameworks that specify where you're supposed to place your wind turbines. So all of this needs to be taken into account when you are developing your power system model. And unfortunately, I could not fit these drawings much larger, but I tried to break down sort of the regions that are of interest to me when I develop my energy system models. And even here you can see some resolution of the available data that we have. And data is sort of the key component when you're developing your energy system model. You need to have it at a resolution that gives a good representation of that area, but still the data still has to be accurate. So for example, when you are looking at the available resources, so the first column here, you have what you would call the potential, energy yield potential for solar and wind. And as you can see, areas that are close to the North Sea, sort of Norway and Denmark, because also offshore wind is represented in this graph, you can see that these areas have good resource for energy yield, so production of energy from wind. And as we go into the southern areas, you can see that Spain also with their solar potential, and their actually it's a combination of how much area is available, land area, and also a combination of the amount of solar potential that is in that area. So you can see that in the southern areas like Spain, you have good energy yield. And this also can be seen in the Balkan areas where you also have some good solar resources and some large land area that might be possible to develop more solar. On the second column, we have a representation of the demand. Where is the demand located? It's not everywhere. If we look in sort of the northeastern part, demand is very much concentrated in Germany and in Poland. So these are some of the big countries that consume a lot of energy. And here I use population as a proxy because we don't really have a good measure of energy demand at very low spatial resolution. What we do in energy modeling, we look at parameters, variables that give us a proxy of where the demand could be, and population and GDP are good proxies. Population has been, there is spatial data for population at very low resolution, and this can be used in energy system models, as opposed to GDP, where we only have it at municipal areas. So you have to use a combination of the two when you are working with developing your representation of demand. And then the final column is pump storage. So we are lucky that now more models that have been developed in the past are providing the data on power plants. Where are they located? There's been an accumulation of data in the past. This data has been closed source. It's been really difficult to get access to this data, but now they are making it more readily accessible. And one of the data sets that's come out recently is the distribution, the spatial distribution of pump storage. And this is sort of what I depict in the last column. It's showing you where are these pump storage located. And it's important to note here that these colors are not relatable when you switch rows. So it doesn't mean that because this is dark red, it's the same as up here. Actually, in Norway, this is a lot higher in potential than in Spain or in the Balkan regions. But it's just to show you that within those regions, where are the potential for storage? Even in the Balkans, there's quite a bit of potential. In Greece, you have potential in the Alps, in addition to the large storage potentials in Norway. So now that we understand where all our components are spatially distributed, we can sort of build our energy system model and analyze what insights can we capture from their sort of placements. And it's also important when you are developing your model to understand how your scope, for example, affects your results. So if you decide to focus on a region, if you include certain countries, so in this example, these results all represent Germany. So the energy mix of Germany, if we went to 100% renewables with some storage, and this actually includes some heat demand. So in the first column, you have some countries that are interconnected with Germany, that have some resources available that Germany can tap into, especially I think the biggest impact here is the fact that Norway is interconnected with Germany. So what this results into is that you have some offshore wind and onshore wind that is the biggest component in renewable energy. But what happens here is that Germany is using the storage capacity of Norway to balance out its energy demand with the demand in heat and solar. in electricity, and in the other ones, the two columns after that, there is no access to Norway. So you require a large amount of storage capacity, and in this case also transmission grids that are represented here, to balance out this mismatch in demand and supply. And and there's another comparison that I make. If we were to also better understand how these areas have in energy demand and supply, and you aggregate these regions according to that, to these attributes, you can even change your results slightly just by changing the configurations of how you aggregate these areas together. So if you see these two columns here, you can see there's a difference in the way these areas have been compiled together, aggregated the data, and this will result in new results. And this is exactly what I depict here, just by understanding where your solar and wind potentials are, where your energy demand is, and where the pump storage are within a specific country. The method you choose to aggregate this data together can result in new regions. For example, if you decide to aggregate all these areas here together, you can have a better representation of a region instead of maybe separating two areas and then leaving out. So this is somewhat of a new development, understanding how we aggregate areas and what the impacts of that is on the energy system modeling. So what I did in my publication, I very much looked into this in more detail. I did an analysis of how you can aggregate data, and a method that I developed, and I combine attributes of energy demand, energy supply, and storage together to aggregate areas. And I could see that by doing this, I could better capture the transmission capacity expansion needs, and I could also better capture the representation of solar and wind potential. And this is, the results were significant because I could replicate it for multiple countries, although it was more significant in Germany, because Germany, there is quite a variation, especially in solar demand and wind demand across the country. In the northern areas, you have more wind than in the southern areas, and your demand is also more located in the southern areas than in the northern areas. So working with a lot of data, spatial data, with high temporal resolution, it's important to structure them in a way that people can access it easily, can change it. So I developed a method to do that, and I focus on data processing. I won't go too much into this, but this is a work that I'm still doing, and I wanted to say a few words about it. And I developed a two-step method. This two-step method has been documented on how to standardize your indices and your data, and how to define regions. Thank you very much for your attention.